Cloudcast Media presents from the massive studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. This is the Cloudcast with Aaron Delp and Brian Gracely, bringing you the best of cloud computing from around the world.
Good morning, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome back to the Cloudcast. We are coming to you live from the massive Cloudcast studios here in Raleigh, North Carolina. Hope everybody is doing well. Another weekend perspective as we begin to wrap up October of 2024. I think we've got one more show left this month, but almost done with the month. We're getting down to the last 2 months of the year. Unbelievable. We are, 10 out of 12. So, 5/6 of the way done through the year, about 83%. Hope everybody's doing well. Hope everybody is, starting to make plans for Q4, which usually involves all sorts of end-of-year activities, holiday activities, people starting to plan family activities and all sorts of stuff. The weather is kind of a beautiful time of year. At least here in North Carolina, we've got falls, setting in, and the weather is the nice. Leaves are changing, all those sorts of things. Today's show is going to be a little weird in that, I feel like to a certain extent, Aaron and I have been covering, aspects of AI for a number of years, and obviously over the last couple of years, that's ramped up quite a bit as it's become a very tangible technology for a lot of people, but also a very top of mind topic for lots of people, whether you're a technologist, a business person or not. And, I feel like there's times, in the learning curve, in the learning process in which, you feel like you're making some progress, you're learning some things. And then sometimes there's some moments where, you sort of step back or, maybe the other way of looking at it is you start to, ask a question, you start to go down a rabbit hole. And I feel like I sort of did that over the last couple of days. And the reason being was, there was an article, a manifesto, a really long blog post. I don't even know what the right word would be for it, but the folks at Anthropic, the CEO of Anthropic, put together Dario Amodei, put together, I don't know, I'm going to call it a manifesto. It's just an article. I mean, it's a really long written paper. I don't really know what he calls it, but it's called Machines of Loving Grace, How AI Could Transform the World for the Better. And the context of this, I assume this is being written because Anthropic is in the process of looking for a round of funding, as is very normal for basically what feels like every AI company today. This comes on the heels of OpenAI, recently in the last few weeks, finalizing a $6+ billion round of funding, $6.5 billion round of funding. And I assume just given the arms race that's going on in AI and, the fact that many of the Anthropic people spun out of OpenAI and spun out of, originally Google and other places, that they're all sort of chasing the same thing, which is, the biggest model in the world, which obviously is going to cost the most, is going to take the most VC funding, it's going to take the most data scientists and so forth. And, I think before sort of this last round of funding has come along and we're starting to deal with stuff in the, fives of billions and tens of billions. And I mean, really, really, really big numbers here. I think to a certain extent, I was trying to understand the technologies. I was kind of trying to understand some of the dynamics of the company, some of the partnerships that were going on. And to be perfectly honest, I don't know that I really, really thought about or really had dug into, what did these companies aspire to, or what was what were the things that they were sort of promising? Because if you're asking somebody for, $6.5 billion, and you think about the normal, sort of VC expectation of return on, in return on their money, 10x is sort of the starting point, and maybe they're really looking for like 20x or 100x, right? And if you put that into context, if we're talking about, let's just say the number is $6 billion or $7 billion, you're talking about at 10x, you're talking about a $60 billion return. If you're talking about 20x, $120 billion return, and then you can, continue to do the multiples from there. And so, we're talking about something that on an annualized basis looks like AWS, looks like some very, very large companies, looks like Oracle, looks like, a chunk of Microsoft and so forth. So, I don't think that part surprised any of us so much, right? They would like to become gigantic companies. They would like to be amongst the largest tech companies in our industry. But I guess what I sort of started digging into as I was reading this article, and there was another sort of similar manifesto written by Sam Altman from OpenAI recently, and I'll put both these links in the show notes, is, they really start getting into, what I think trying to make a case, essentially a case to venture capitalists for the most part, but I think to a certain extent, kind of in some level of transparency to the world. But essentially sort of saying like, well, what could we do with all this stuff? Because I think the challenge that they're all facing right now is that the perception or the, kind of the visibility is these companies are amassing massive amounts of hardware, these GPU clusters in order, compute clusters in order to build these gigantic models. They are amassing a huge number of data scientists to, be able to build these models, train them, tune them, and so on and so forth. And you sort of go, what are you going to do with this, right? Like when you get to a point where you've built this gigantic thing or, things, what are you going to do with it, right? Because things like ChatGPT are interesting, and if the world was just a whole bunch of chatbots that augmented every single application, or whatever Apple Intelligence is going to put on 2 billion iPhones or whatever it might be, you'd sort of go, okay, that's a level of progress that aligns very much to a certain amount of entertainment, a certain amount of kind of augmenting human capabilities, human productivity, hopefully beginning to start to address some challenging things that humans have some limitations of in terms of needing to be able to eat and sleep and reason over things and have learning curves and all this stuff. And then I started reading sort of reading through this manifesto. And again, I'm not really looking to kind of criticize it. It is a unbelievably ambitious and sort of unbelievably wide possible vision of what could happen. But I think the thing that jumped out at me was, in essence, and the way he lays this out is, he has, there's 5 or 6 sections. It's basic assumptions and framework. And then he starts going through the areas in which he thinks, what he calls powerful AI as opposed to AGI, sort of, automated general intelligence, or, artificial general intelligence, AGI, the term that's oftentimes referred to with OpenAI, but essentially, the idea that the AI can sort of, outthink humans and outperform humans and all sorts of things like that. They call it powerful AI, but again, means the same thing. Essentially says, the basic assumptions and frameworks of what can happen once we reach a state of powerful AI. And then he begins to sort of go through these areas in which he believes, there can be significant improvements to mankind, to humanity, to all sorts of things. And so the first section is biology and health. The second section is neuroscience and the mind. The third is economic development and poverty. The fourth is peace and governance. And the fifth is work and meaning. And it's an extremely long piece of work. I mean, it's, this is one that is going to take you a while to read through it. But I guess what sort of surprised me as I read through it, or was enlightening as I read through it, was, if I think back, and again, my way of thinking about stuff is, there's always challenges when something brand new comes along, essentially brand new in the science and technology space or in the mathematics space or whatever, to sort of wrap your head around what's possible, because oftentimes the initial things that come out of it, get hyped as being much bigger, much more potential, but they don't necessarily deliver that. And so there's always a certain amount of like, well, what could this thing be? What will it be? Because I'd love to see that right now. And the people who have built this, to a certain extent, don't always know where it's going. They just know that they've gotten over the first hurdle. But I think what I tend to do, and again, this might be a flaw of myself, it might be a good way of looking at things, I don't know, is I oftentimes try and think back historically or find an analogy or find a parallel to say, okay, what was this like? What could this be like? And the thing that I sort of went back to is, I look for, the really big jumps in technology. And so I sort of went back and said, let's think about like where Google was, right? Back in 2000, roughly 2004, I think is when Google went IPO. So somewhere between like 1998 and 2004, when Google was kind of evolving from, kind of the earliest of research papers that Sergey and Larry wrote into what became Google, and then what eventually became sort of monetized Google and public Google and all those sort of things. You've got companies now in places like Anthropic and OpenAI that have taken on the order of $6, 10, $20 billion in funding, somewhere in that range, right? Google took less than $50 million in fundings with an M. So you've got orders and orders of magnitude less money to go into this. And Google had a, gigantic idea, right? They want to organize the world's information, which, again, everything is relative. The world has, in terms of the amount of information that's been created, it's been, massive. But, they, at the time they said, hey, we want to organize the world's information, but didn't necessarily say what they're going to do with that information. It was just the idea of like, if the world's information was digitized and you could find all of it, then who knows what could happen, right? But that was a stepping stone that seemed like a very large goal. Again, sort of ambiguous and open-ended as to what it could be. Maybe it was just, the world's library, and that could be a very, very valuable thing. But it wasn't like, what could become from what Google was. So as I began to read through this thing, and again, I read this entirely with the mindset of like, this is being written with an audience of venture capitalists and investors, and trying to lay out a world for them in which they could easily see their $6 billion investment becoming $60 billion or $120 billion or something. But I thought it was really an interesting way of looking into sort of the mind of somebody who's trying to lay out how you could change the entire world, and the type of ways in which they prioritize stuff that was very kind of organized and structured, and had foundational things. So there's a lot in here about how you can improve science, and there's a lot in here about how you can improve, the ability to look at chemistry and biology and things that could find cures for diseases. And those are all super ambitious and would be fantastic additions to the world. And included a number of things that said, hey, look, and there's going to be limitations on these things. There's going to be the sort of like law, human laws, regional laws, government laws, aspects of morality, when you start doing testing on animals or testing on humans, and, accelerating all that sort of stuff. And so that could all be, very easily sort of read through and appreciated. Where it starts to get really interesting, though, is, and just doing that in and of itself, if you were to create the world's greatest chemistry and biology company, the world's greatest pharmaceutical company, the world's greatest, thing that was focused on trying to eradicate, the things that are the ills of human health, right? Everything from diabetes to obesity to cancer to Alzheimer's to ALS to, blindness, things that, cause children to have, all sorts of deficiencies, whether it's, mental health, whatever it might be, could be anxiety, could be depression. Just in and of itself, that would be an amazing, amazing accomplishment, and something that, if you were to focus on it, if you said, hey, that's what, but where it starts to get really, really interesting, and this is where I think it sort of opened my eyes as far as the sort of idea of like, we're going to try and invent this stuff, or we think there's a possibility of this stuff. And the way to get there is to essentially sort of suspend belief or suspend what you know about the human race and the way that humans organize, the way that humans, create communities, the way that humans, think about their place in the world, right? Whether it's religious or moral or how they organize and are governed and allow themselves to be governed or whatever those things were. And then you start to realize the other thing that's sort of, I don't want to call it crazy or far-fetched, but the timeline in which they sort of put these things in here. So, I mean, there are claims in this thing in which they say, we think that we could, the sort of, the framing of it is like, what could we do to human mortality, right? Like how long people live. And they sort of said, hey, over the last decade, over the last century or so, we've seen, the lifespan, double, right? So maybe it was 35 or 40, and now it's up to 70. I think the timing of that is a little longer. I think people were living past 40, in 1900, but even if it's over a couple hundred years. And then they sort of said, we think that the 21st century, when powered by powerful AI, could continue to be a doubling factor, and we could see this happen in 5 to 10 years. And you go, oh, okay, like maybe you could figure out the science of, eliminating all sorts of stuff, right? All sorts of things that cause diseases and, kind of narrow down the things that sort of quote unquote cause death. But then you sort of step back and you go, but have you thought about the other aspects of this? Have you thought about what happens when we have a population and then you essentially, and you're like, and the population has typically a roughly finite amount of time, but because of that, there are a certain amount of resources allocated for people. There's housing, there's, funding that whether they generate it themselves or whether it comes from taxpayer dollars, all sorts of things that sustain humanity from, the most basic things in the Maslow hierarchy to, the things that are, kind of at the top and are, wants as opposed to needs and so forth. And you kind of go, why are you talking about this? Like and again, this is where it sort of blows my mind, and I'm trying really hard not to sort of place judgment, but like, if all of a sudden in the time frame that they lay out, which is like 5 to 10 years, a couple of Kubernetes upgrade cycles, if you will, that you're gonna double the expected life cycle or the expected mortality age of humanity to like 150 years. And this is sort of where you start to go, boy, you guys are taking on just an insane amount of stuff. And it does make you wonder, like, is there really something that these, unbelievable AI scientists think they're able to see, even scratches of it right now, in which they can make a claim like that? Or are they just, completely sort of, I don't want to call it conning, or I don't want to sort of belittle it, but like, is it a naivety? Is it I don't even know what to call it, that you would make a statement that bold, other than to just simply try and say, hey, just give us the money. Like, give us the money now. We'll figure out how far we can get, and we'll go from there. But I think the thing that sort of surprised me as I was reading this thing, and maybe it shouldn't have surprised me because I've been around the tech industry for a very long time and I've seen a lot of things, both really interesting as well as really questionable, is the number of things that just the sheer number of things that they think this powerful AI, in this case, could do, from the perspective of, all of science, all of, human community and interaction, all of government. I mean, some of the government things in here are, they're out there. I mean, I guess I can kind of appreciate somebody saying, well, let's suppose we just sort of took the human factor out of all things and we treated things just as like a completely rational system. Maybe you could get yourself there, but it's, it was kind of really just the first time. I feel like I'm rambling to a certain extent, and I'm slack jawed at certain things, but just, you just really kind of wonder about, like, do you really believe these things, or did you just find yourself writing things out on a whiteboard and you were like, well, I got a lot more room to the right on the whiteboard. I'm just going to kind of keep being like, well, what if, and those are all fine, but to start to put them into time frames that are like within 5 years and 10 years, like changing all of mankind in ways that haven't happened in thousands of years, you just sort of go, wow, that's the thing. And I guess I can appreciate it from the perspective of, you want to give people great hope and great what's possible, but at the same time, boy, it makes it really, really challenging to sort of rationalize it and wrap your head around, being like, are you hoping to achieve 1% of that? Or do you think you could achieve 20% of that or 30% of that? Because that just seems like, all of mankind's knowledge, all of mankind's evolution, and oh, by the way, all of the rationalization of humans being involved, and the irrationality of humans, and the greed and other things of humans not being involved with the equation. It's just, it was just a stunning read. And I know I'm rambling a little bit, and, I encourage folks to go take a look at some of these, because I think when we have a tendency to sort of, with this new AI, kind of make it personalized, because it is now sort of personalized. It's moved from, just being, hey, data scientists can do this stuff, to like, hey, you can have a ChatGPT account, you can have a Claude account, you could, create interesting stuff with Midjourney or whatever tool is your favorite thing. But then you sort of realize, like, what are the people that are asking for all the money, asking to become masters of the universe? What are they putting pen to paper and trying to convince other people that might be there? And this just feels like, and I've seen a lot. I've been through a lot in the tech industry. I've seen a lot of, people that want to position themselves as sort of the messiah of the world with their technology. This just seems like a whole different ballgame. And maybe just, because these people are in the middle of it, I mean, they have greater insight into it than any of the rest of us do, because the math is so complicated and the concepts are so complicated. But boy, it is striking the amount of things that they think they're going to be able to do. And again, I come back to comparing this to, the tech revolutions that have happened before this. And it's like, yes, you've collected all the information of the world. Yes, you've built systems like databases that can collect all sorts of information. You have put a computer on every desktop in the world, and in the sense of like Microsoft's goal, we want to put a computer on everybody's desk, or you're Apple and you want to put a computer in everybody's pocket. And those are amazing accomplishments. But in essence, they were, the thing of bringing technology to the masses, and kind of going, well, we'll see how that impacts what people do. All right, we'll see how that changes it. But I just feel like the level of kind of, I don't want to even say expectation, but just sort of like articulating that this thing is going to completely change every human dynamic that has ever existed, from, how people interact, to how people organize, to what they believe, government, religion, science, the economy. Like, it's amazing. So anyways, I this is sort of a weird episode. I feel like I'm literally just sort of been dumbfounded for 20 plus minutes. But I highly encourage folks to go take a read of this stuff, especially if you're kind of following along in AI. And I don't mean it by any means to be demeaning to this. It is just, it's kind of a stunning read that there's a viewpoint out there that it is going to be that impactful in such a short period of time. And again, I go back to, there are smart people in the VC community. There are, less smart people in the VC community too, as we've seen. But I'm fascinated. I guess there is such a fear of missing out on things that they will raise insane amounts of money. But gosh, it has just completely scrambled my brain as to what the world would actually look like if this stuff sort of pans out the way that these articles are written. Just the power dynamics, the role of mankind, the dynamics they expect of actual people and the relationship that it has with with other people and with their government and with communities and so forth. It just I'm sort of scrambled with this one. So anyways, I'm going to put the links in the show notes. Give it a read. I'd love to hear your feedback. I'd love to hear how far you got into the document, because again, it is thousands and thousands of words. I mean, this is not a simple TLDR, but I'd be very curious as to what your reaction was to sort of reading through this, and just at one point where you're like, holy cow, or did you read through the whole thing and you were just super inspired and you have a whole new perspective on what's possible. So would love to hear any of those things if you get a chance to read some of this stuff. So anyways, with that, I'll wrap it up. Apologize for the sort of long-winded, kind of slack-jawed, kind of feeling in awe. But it almost feels like a little bit of a sudden reaction, instant reaction kind of show. But I'm really interested to see what people have to say about this stuff, or if they just go, hey, yeah, we've seen this in technology. Don't read too much in. But it's just people trying to make a big story for getting funding. So anyways, with that, I'll wrap it up. We will talk to you next week.
Thank you for listening to The Cloudcast. Please visit thecloudcast.net to find more shows, show notes, videos, and everything social media.